last things.
Y'all hear that?
The word in Greek, the word eschatos
Mm-hmm.
is last, meaning the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Remember that verse?
Yes.
In the Greek, that's eschatos. And so eschatology is the study of last things, or the study of the end times. You know, it's not just Revelation. It'll be a while before, we might do a verse or two like I'm just doing, but to really study Revelation is a big undertaking.
Oh, yeah.
It's much better to start in the Old Testament.
No, we got
That's the foundation,
Yeah.
and that's what I was talking about a while ago. Is you understand the new when you have the Old Testament as your foundation.
Yeah.
Revelation is no exception. Revelation has more quotes and allusions to the Old Testament than any other New Testament book in the Bible. So if you read Revelation, which I did as a kid, what in the world is this mess? You have to, before you can make any sense of it at all, you have to start. Oh, well, that piece in the Old Testament connects to this piece in Revelation, etc. And then it actually starts making sense. All right, now let's go to Daniel 9:24. This is the Old Testament verse I'm going to talk about, where it shows they had we're going to come back to Daniel 9 more later, but I want to show you one verse where you can see why Paul constantly connected blamelessness with the coming of the Messiah. It was in his Bible. And Daniel 9:24. Daniel 9:24. 70 weeks. Now a week. I'll have to explain this later, but it's not a week of days. It's a week of years, meaning 7 years. In other words, the Hebrew word there simply means 7, as in a week. So you can have a week of days, a week of years, and Jewish thought actually supports the idea of a week of millennium, a 1,000-year period. So in this case, it's 70 weeks. So 70 times 7 is 490 years. 70 weeks, 490 years, are decreed about your people and your holy city to bring the rebellion to an end. Oh, by the way, I'm using the Holman HCSB, the Holman Christian Standard Bible. Usually I don't use that translation because it's kind of new to me, but I've found that this translation for this hard to translate verse, Daniel 9, this vision that Daniel has in Daniel 9, in my opinion, it's the best translation for that one vision, for that one chapter or verse. All right, so I'm just reading it. Other translations will be very similar, especially for this first verse. Daniel 9:24. 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city to bring the rebellion to an end. That would be sin of the whole nation.
Okay.
To put a stop to sin. Now, all of this is your people and your holy city. So he's talking about the whole nation, everybody.
Okay. That's what it says here.
And that would have to be each individual one of us, but God actually has a plan for Israel. And oh, by the way, we're grafted into it. Gentiles are grafted into Israel. So it's talking about us to bring an end to the rebellion, to put a stop to sin, to wipe away iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy. That hadn't happened yet, because we believe in the gifts of the Spirit. But when Christ returns, that's sealed, because Christ is here.
That's right.
We don't need the visions and the prophecies after Christ returns. But to seal up vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy place. Other translations say to anoint the most holy or the Holy One. Anyway, that's a little problem, question of the translation. So again, 490 years were actually given, and later on we'll come back and see when that 490 years began, but a period of time was given for Israel to stop sinning, and at the end of that time, in verses that follow, it's the Messiah comes, but the Antichrist comes at the same time. Well, we'll get to that later. But now when this period of time actually did run out, and the Messiah came, it was, we'll see later, it's broken up into several different pieces. 62 weeks. After 62 weeks, the Messiah came. Israel did not recognize the Messiah, and so 7 weeks were moved off into the future, which I believe we're in today. And the fact that it got moved off into the future made it an unknown day and hour.
Because the Bible tells us too that his thoughts are not like ours, so his days are calculated different from even our days, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, and this is a difficult verse. There's different opinions as to how it's translated, but I believe that the closer we get to the return of Christ, and there's verses that will support this, but the closer we get, the better we will be able to understand, and especially the prophecies. Now, because God does want us to, He does tell His people what He's going to do before He does it, but at the same time, some of these prophecies are difficult, and so we have to say, well, I think it means this, and you think it means that, and that's fine, but it's really good to know them. It's really good to be aware of, that these things exist, and it's also really good to help us understand Paul's thinking, because Paul knew this verse. A given amount of time till the Messiah comes, and during that time, Israel had to stop sin and wipe out iniquity and bring in everlasting righteousness. Again, we'll get back to Daniel 9 later, but that was the Jewish teaching, because this is the Old Testament. This was their Bible. So Paul continues with that thought that you may be blameless at the coming of the Messiah. In other words, he came, then he left, now he's coming again. So, but the same would be, part of it got moved off into the future, and then that he comes again.
Yeah, because
so
it's going to come again.
Yeah. So when he comes again at the end of so now we know what the end times are. It's these 490 years. At the end of the 490 years is in the end times. End of what? End of the 490 years. And it is when the Messiah comes.
But at the end of those times, we should be able to see in this New Testament scripture some of those signs.
Exactly.
So we know where we, I don't know if we can calculate to the thing, but we should be able to tell some of the signs, right?
Yeah. We'll get to that. What Jesus taught, the disciples asked the very same question. What are the signs and at the end of the age? Now, in the King James, it was translated to the end of the world. That was a mistake on the King James part, and I can tell you the reason for that, but that's a rabbit hole I don't want to go down right now. But in the Greek it's eon, which means age. What are the signs of the end of the age?
Right.
And so yes, there are the signs, and we've talked about some of them earlier on. But the big number one, in my opinion, is Israel becoming a nation again. this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Well, what is this generation? And in my opinion, we'll get to it, but in my opinion, it's the beginning of Israel. You know, the baby boom generation was, those people were the peak of the baby, you know, the start of the baby boom generation. Huh?
Talk a little loud.
I know. The start of the baby boom generation was also the, you know, when that was the end of World War II. It's also when Israel became a nation. So the baby boom generation, in my opinion, is the generation that does not pass away until all these things take place. And we'll get to the scriptures for why I believe that. All right. How much more? Do you
1 minute. 1 minute. It's almost 7:30.
All right, so this is a good stopping place. So we want to pray out?
Yeah. Do you want us to have come back with some scriptures next week, or you gonna have your scripture just for us?
We don't need to do homework.
Okay, right. Okay, all right. Yeah. So you can pray us out if you like. Thank you.
Lord Jesus, we just thank you for this time to come together and learn about your word, and to learn how we really need you.
Yes.
We need you to work in our lives to overcome sin as we love one another and serve one another. Be slaves for one another, as in servants. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
That's good. Y'all heard that, how he broke that down? He said, and slaves be in service one to another. Because that's what we're supposed to serve one another.
Yeah. In the Greek, that word servant is the same as the word slave.
Yes.